This series is brought to you by Globe Plants. Welcome back to part 2, where we're going to dive straight into the nitty-gritty, and I'm going to give you guys a gift. So first of all, let's start by showcasing what that gift is. If we hit the import button, go to open, you're going to be able to download this Twinmotion tutorial SketchUp file. If we open that up, keep all of our settings exactly the same as you see them on the screen right now, and press import. It's going to process all of that data and bring in our beautiful house that we're going to be modeling and playing with. Now, I'm going to leave a Dropbox link to this project right here, directly below Globe Plants in the description. So go download this and keep following on with the tutorial. Basically, once you've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to select the starting ground like we learned last time. We're going to select the top arrow and just drag that starting ground lower until it fully disappears from our entire project. Changing our speed across so we can fly a little bit quicker because this project got bigger. We don't need this starting base anymore, so I'm simply going to select the starting base and hit delete. If you fly around to check out this beautiful house, it is a unique design, cantilevering across the cascading land over the ocean, which would be somewhere over here. We'll dive into that later. But in today's tutorial, we are talking about the materiality of this house, how we can make it look absolutely stunning. Best practice would be to actually create the HDRI sky first and select what you want this environment to look like. So then that way we don't have to go back and actually change our materials to suit the sky. So before we dive into materials, I will be diving into HDRI skies. First thing you want to do is simply select your skies and go into skies once more. After that, your choice, you can pick any of the skies available to you. There's hundreds and hundreds of options. Generally, I like a morning and afternoon sun. I generally like it to be either cloudy or clear. I like a darker, grayer sky to really pop the actual building out a little bit more. And when you shift through them, the little picture appears on the right-hand side, and you see how it affects glass, solid, and reflective materials. So each one will change the color of your actual project. Hence why I personally recommend it is important to pick your HDRI sky first. Now, for ease of use, let's simply go back. Let's go to an overcast sky. Let's pick sky 10. And all you need to do is left click once, drag it onto your sky and drop it into your project. That will automatically change, adjust, and make the scene significantly nicer. Now, if you wanted to adjust the actual orientation of that sky, where the shadows are cast on the building, you'd see the ambience panel on the right-hand side change. And all you'd need to do was scroll down to HDRI sky and adjust your rotation panel. So however you wanted those shadows to be cast on your building, you could simply adjust the rotation. For me personally, I'm not too fussed, I'm not too bothered. It's more about creating the actual environment, getting those colors right to begin with. So let's leave all that, not worry about that. We'll come to all of that in another video. What we want to do is come to our materials palette, and we want to go through each step one by one and really fine tune these things. So let's get started with glass being the very first material on our list. If we select glass, we're going to have 100 different options, completely up to us which one we choose. Do I want clear glass? So I can drop that directly into my project and see into my house from a distance, potentially, but at the same time, I really like a slight reflective glass, because that way, when you have some clouds into the photos and into the renders, you can see the reflection of whatever's on the other side. Personally, I like that. I really enjoy a reflective glass. Now, to make this glass really stand out, we want to go through our reflective glass material palette on the right-hand side. Every single material is going to have something similar. So I'll explain in detail for glass, and then you'll get the general gist of it for everything else. First of all, you have your 3D sphere that showcases how that object would actually look in reality. You can change it to standard glass, or you can go to colored glass, which loses its transparency completely. Down below, you're going to have the tint. So if I select the tint, you're going to have a color picker open up. This color picker can occasionally get hidden behind the project. So if at any point in time you cannot click on anything, Twinmotion seems like it's broken or that it's frozen, just move your window around, see if you can find this color picker. But by the color picker, very self-explanatory, drag it around, change it, adjust it. If you want red dark glass, you can have that. Tinted red glass, absolutely disgusting. Each to their own, and Twinmotion allows you to do whatever you want. Potentially you might want black, dark, or even frosted glass. You can change that slightly there so you get nice black glass. You can open up the details panel and adjust the sliders as you would in Lightroom, but for now I'm going to keep that closed. Opacity is going to be exactly what you'd expect it to be. It's the opacity of the transparency within the glass. And just like tint, you have a few more little details below. You can invert the mask, use opacity maps, get really intricate and really detailed with your actual objects. But for now, we'll keep it relatively basic. We won't overwhelm you at this point in time. Continuing to move down, if we had a pattern on our glass, so let's change it to this crazy floral sticker that I hope nobody puts on an entire facade of a building like this. You can adjust the rotation along with the slider and it will adjust that pattern's rotation. You can also adjust the scale here if you wanted it to be bigger or smaller. This is applicable to all, but obviously a lot easier to understand and comprehend with a pattern shown on top. If you open up the details panel, you can get a bit more control, stretch it on the X-axis, stretch it on the Y-axis only, offset left and right if you're trying to align patterns together. And if you're trying to make patterns move, you can adjust them like that. So they have some sort of speed to them in a direction. Again, you wouldn't have that for a static, but the option is available to you. If you wanted it to be a mirror, simply drag and drop mirror or go back to your original reflective glass up top left. It doesn't matter how many changes you make to this, you can always come back and drag and drop the original back in. Now it's always best to just go through and play with all of these settings to see how they affect the project, how they affect the material, and what can be done to make the details look even better. For me personally, glass isn't too bad. It's one of those objects that's pretty decent from the get-go. So I'm happy to leave it as just reflective glass for the time being. Moving back into our materials, we can now dive into our metals. For me personally, in this instance, the window frames would be some form of metal. They could be a brushed aluminium, maybe a matte chrome, or even a hammered copper finish, depending on what we were looking for. Being on the coast, it might even be galvanized steel, so if I wanted it to be, drag, drop, let that go on the window frame. Now, I definitely don't want it to be galvanized steel. Let's scroll back up. Let's grab our matte chrome, drag and drop that over our aluminium frames, scroll back up to our color, select the color palette, and then adjust. So simply dragging down is going to change that from a gray to black and pressing OK. Up close, you can see there's not much going on here. It's relatively rough. It's not too smooth. It's pretty much in the middle because roughness is at 50. So if I drag it back down to 0, we'll get quite a bit of shine, quite a bit of reflection on these window frames. It's up to you if that's what you want or if you'd actually like it to be a little bit different. So I could easily adjust that back up and make it back in the middle of 50. Now there are a few glitches in this model and I do apologize for that. However, it was a quick model to be able to give you guys something free, something that you can actually learn Twinmotion with. So whenever you have glitches like this in the model, it basically means two materials are overlapping. If I select that object right there, it's probably going to let me move it ever so slightly. So if I pick that, go minus 0.01, press OK, fly back in, that is going to disappear because my materials are no longer overlapping. Now what you'll notice in Twinmotion with my window frames, that black color was automatically linked to my roof. In Twinmotion, any colors you have in your base model, so wherever you've imported it from, SketchUp, ArchiCAD, whatever, you're going to have to understand that it's going to link colors together. So by having this window frame as black and the roof as black, any adjustments I make to the window frame is automatically going to change it to the roof. Now, because I've unclicked off that window frame, you might be thinking, oh no, how do I come back to that? Well, if you come up to the top, you're going to see this eyedropper tool. It's our material pickup. By simply dragging across anything, left clicking, it's going to open up that material that you're looking for. Same with this matte chrome, same as the roof. So now if I were to adjust this slider, you'd see the roof change in line with my window frames. Pressing cancel, it will change that back to how I want it to be. and we can continue working through this design and the materials. The concrete on the outside is shown as a concrete panel, but it really wouldn't be. It'd most likely be some sort of smooth concrete finish. It wouldn't have the concrete panel lines, or not to this extent. So if we come back to our main library and come into mega scans this time for a different material, we'll go into surfaces and we're going to scroll until we find concrete on the left hand side. Megascans has so many more options for us, so we can go through these and try to find the best thing for what we're trying to articulate. If we start with the slab tool, we can scroll through all the options and see if there's anything that we really like in this scenario. A cast in situ concrete like this could be quite nice, and I say could because every material is slightly different. So if we hit that little download arrow, we can let it download to our computer, right click, drag it across. Before letting go, what you'll notice is all Megascans materials and objects will kind of come in white and pause. It's because they're downloading into your system now for the first time. So now if I let go, object creation will happen and we'll see some sort of formwork. Now that rotation would become very important in this scenario because we need to rotate it so it aligns perfectly with this. But now I have all sorts of problems because my model is in a variety of different angles. So that form board concrete without going back into the original model just wouldn't suit this project. So if we come back out, let's go into smooth and try to find a beautiful concrete. Let's download this concrete floor and potentially also a few others. Let's go smooth concrete wall, concrete sidewalk, just download a few to test out and see what the best options are for us. So let's start with concrete sidewalk, drag, drop, release. Grungy, it's a bit grainy, but it's not a bad concrete color per se. So I'm going to leave this one as a potential maybe as we scroll through the other options. The smooth concrete is definitely too bland and too boring for me. But what I could do is increase some grunge, which is basically aging and weathering in the actual material, which would give it a bit more of the look I'm looking for. So that actually is quite nice in my opinion for this model. I could then also turn down the luminosity, which would make it a little bit darker or a little bit lighter, a little bit more glowing. Zooming back out, we could potentially see how that building looks from afar. Now, obviously, it would be amazing to get rid of this garage, move it somewhere else in this model. It just didn't work anywhere else in this design. However, if you wanted to delete it, you could go through one by one and just start tapping the delete button until eventually you got somewhere and deleted enough of it that you were happy with. Now, I'll undo all that because I kind of want to keep the garage for the purposes of argument and for this tutorial. So we'll keep that there, but you can delete it all if you so choose and want to make this even more powerful of an architectural statement. Now, for the time being, again, I'm relatively happy with this concrete and I can adjust it continuously as we move on, or I could easily go back to my sidewalk, reduce my scale or increase my scale to make it something a little bit different. It's probably a little bit too busy for the sidewalk, so I'm going to keep it as that smooth concrete, increase the grunge, adjust my settings ever so slightly, and there we go. Now we have a concrete fascia design that basically will create an absolute stunning render from almost any angle looking at it. If we wanted to fly into our house, we could simply hit that eye again, go to our pedestrian mode, and it would drop us into pedestrian mode. We can't actually walk through solid objects anymore, which is really frustrating. So pedestrian mode, unless you've got everything set up properly, it's not going to work for you, but you will have a perfectly accessible pedestrian. So if we jump back into drone mode, fly into our house, now change back into pedestrian mode, we can walk around our house freely. Maybe let's reduce our speed back to 3 or 4 so that we can walk around our house, bump into all walls. We can't make it through the doors until we go back to drone mode, but we can see what's going on in this main space as if we actually lived here. And if you wanted to mess with the materials on the inside, you could very much do so, like this stone, for example. needs a little bit of work, needs a little bit of love. So if we go back to our mega scan surfaces, go into our marble, let's go polished marble and see what kind of options we have in stunning polished marble. There is many options for us, including this one's quite similar to this stone, but maybe it'll look significantly nicer. Simply drag, drop, let go, and there we go. We have a marble stone top that is pretty much seamless all the way across, and it's a very nice texture that we can adjust as we see fit. So let's say we want it a bit darker, a little bit lighter. It's all there for us to mess with, to play with, and adjust. In case you wanted a nice pink island bench top, you could create that in a matter of seconds. Now I'll undo that. I just want to keep it pretty generic, pretty simple. Going back into drone mode, flying back out to the externals. The materials aren't just for the house. They're also for our environment as well. So let's go back to library. Let's go back to materials and let's select ground. What we want to do before we dive into actually any landscape design, which we'll get into another video, we want to give everything a bit of a base layer so that we have something to build on. If we go nature, we're going to have a variety of different earths and dirts and sands and bits and bobs. So for instance, I can grab grass 5, drag and drop, and now I have new grass at the bottom of my house. Now, if you've ever asked yourself, what is the difference between a high quality render and an average render you see all over Instagram? Well, the difference is the quality, the care, and the assets. That's why I've teamed up with Globe Plants to be able to give you an incredible library of the world's best 3D photorealistic vegetation, trees, shrubs, and everything in between. I've used Globe Plants for a very long time now. You've seen them in my videos before, and finally we've come together to be able to actually bring you a series worthwhile. So if you're looking for some incredible 3D plants, regardless of where you are situated around the world, it doesn't matter if you're in America, Australia, Africa, Europe, they've got all of the plants available for every single person around the globe. So make sure you check out Globe Plants in the description down below. The link is there for your convenience. This sand down below, we might want it to be cracked ground, we might want it to be desert sand, maybe something from the beach. We could have a variety of different options to our heart's content, but for the time being, let's just go some desert sand. Let's drop that in, see what that looks like from a low angle like this. You're going to see the beautiful peaks and valleys of the desert sand, which we can again adjust or decrease in scale as we see fit for the purpose of the render. Sand is one of those things that has so many peaks and valleys, so the sun hits it in a magnitude of ways, and it's quite challenging to depict that with a 2D texture. So if we increase our grunge, we're going to start seeing a lot more darker patches, a lot more changes in the actual moisture, so it starts to look a little bit more real. We don't want it to look too dirty and dark, so maybe somewhere in the 50%. We can also slide our luminance down, increase our roughness, so it's a very rough texture. Now let's say we wanted to use this material for the rest of the environment. We could simply select the material picker, select the material we want to use, and instead of dragging it from the palette and trying to copy it over and over and over again, we could grab our desert sand, drag and drop it into the environment, and it'll replicate that identical material for the rest. Now I don't actually want that. I believe the background would be much nicer as some sort of grass to vegetation, maybe mossy ground. So something a little bit darker, a little bit greener would be lovely. I know I'm going to have a series of trees. This is basically a forest behind this project. I'm easily just going to grab forest ground, dirt, maybe some cobblestones, or maybe even some ground plant cover, drag and drop it in, increase my scale, and make sure from up close that looks relatively decent. Now when it comes time to increase and add all of our plants, I can easily drop some beautiful plants in there. Last but not least is going to be our ground and our man-made objects. So for instance, this road is the wrong material for starters. We want it to be a nice little asphalt. Simply drag and drop the asphalt in, and it's done. We can adjust, make it a bit darker, make it a bit dirtier, and it looks a little bit more realistic now. Generally speaking, if you were doing a very fine-tuned render, you could go back into library, into Megascan surfaces, scroll down to the bottom to asphalt, find a rough asphalt that was more appealing, and potentially you could have one with lines automatically built in. But because this shapes and changes and meanders, it isn't just consistently one straight road. If I were to drag rough line markings, it would just be a very messy texture. Now, one thing I'll point out quickly is that material linking. So because I changed this to that garden bed, it's changed my actual garden bed in here as well. If I go back to ground, back to nature, just change that to forest covered, it will be more of an earth or a mulch type material. If we want to take it a step further and actually get really deep into custom materials, well, then we could come down to the bottom here, go to our materials doc, find a material that we really like. Let's say we like this forest ground, but we want to find something better online or create our own texture. Well, first of all, what we need to do is right click, we want to duplicate, and then we want to rename that material. Let's rename it to Earth Tutorial and press enter. Now, if I select Earth Tutorial, we can adjust things to make it even better. Let's dive into the details. If we drop down that menu, you'll see a textures embedded image appear. There's multiples of different textured websites out there on the internet, so feel free to use whatever you can find. For the better options, you're going to have to pay for them, or you can try create your custom ones through simple Googling. For the purpose of this, let's just jump into Google, search Earth Seamless Texture so that your textures align without random joins and funny objects, and find something that you like. It can literally be almost anything that's free. So if you also type in royalty free, it'll give you a few more images to select from that you can comfortably know aren't going to be copyrighted. Now, for the purpose of this, let's literally grab any of these. This appears to be a royalty free image. I'm not going to dive into it too much. It does look like it's watermarked, so I wouldn't say it is actually free. I would say you'd have to pay for this one if you were going to use it commercially. So let's pick this cracked earth one for just argument. Right click, save to downloads. Close that, go back to our Twinmotion tutorial, click on our texture, and let's go open. In your downloads folder, you're going to find that material, so simply press open again, and you'll see that texture immediately change on the 3D little globe. If we wanted to drag and drop that over our sand and zoom in, you'd see an incredible textured surface that could be utilized however you want. Increase the scale, you'll see it crack and pits and change. Increase the grunge, it gets dirty, filthy. Now it looks like you're in the middle of the actual desert. So if there isn't a material that you can find available to you online or through the Twinmotion library, you can always go ahead and make your own. Anyway, team, that's all from me. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. I'm going to bring a playlist to the side of me, so if you're joining me a little bit later, you can find all of the content right here. Otherwise, smash that subscribe button, drop any comments in the description down below. But like always, I'll see you next Monday.